I hope you're ready for some ill logic. Last time we went over our Week 3 battle against Chad and the Seattle Steamrollers. Please go check that video out first if you have not done so already, as we went over the team battle, post-game analysis, and post-game interview about the match, in which, spoiler alert, the Buffalo Bouffant got back on track a bit with a shaky and awkward 1-0 victory to bring our overall record back up to 2-1 with that +3 differential. This time we'll be taking on Hitmonchan and the 1 and 2 Close Combat Club. Timestamps for the Teambuilder battle and post-game thoughts will be in the description. I've described John as a rival in the Wooper Club, and it's taken me about 3 tries, I think, to get past him. I lost to him in Week 2 of Season 2, and then got crushed again in Week 1 of Season 3, before finally getting past him in the semifinals of Season 3, and again with a cruising victory in Season 4. This season, John had a big win against the Akron Agrons, but has dropped games to the Summit County Psyducks and last week against the Cincinnati Incineroar, none of which we have played yet, but all of which are pretty darn good teams. John has a defensive playstyle normally, but has emerged with an offensive piece to his gameplay, which should be evident as we go over his team. Please also note that, like I had to do last week, John has also, since this battle, made a couple of trades. I don't get the pleasure of looking at my poor Photoshop this time, so instead, please keep in mind as we look at the team that he did not yet have access to Haxorus or the G-Max Snorlax, and in their place were a Sigilyph and a G-Max Charizard. With that understood, the team that I had to prepare for was a Jolteon, a Keldeo, a G-Max Charizard, a Sigilyph, a Torracat, a Klefki, an Umbreon, a Golurk, an Amoonguss, a Slowbro, and an Escavalier. There doesn't seem to be too much in between with this team right now. You have a lot of stalwart pieces like the Umbreon, Amoonguss, and Slowbro, which contrast the offensive pieces of things like Jolteon, Keldeo, the G-Max Charizard, and the Golurk, as well as that Escavalier. And those are complemented by support pieces like Sigilyph, and the Torracat, and the Klefki. Though Golurk and Keldeo have been the flashiest members with KOs, I think his effectiveness this season has really been in pivoting between the defensive members, mainly the Amoonguss and the Slowbro, the Regenerator Core, until he could find an opening and go into those big hitters at the right time. Wear down the opponent's checks until they make a mistake, then claim a KO with a big boy. That's been the name of the game for him so far, but as we saw last week with Chad, that doesn't mean things are going to be the same this time like always. Speaking of things being the same, before we get into the individual breakdowns, I guess we should also go over the elephant in the room, and that is the other changes. That is those 2 new Pokemon that are on my side. Yes, I hinted at it last time, but I have indeed made a pair of transactions that are in effect for this week, and I am confident they are making the team overall just better. So the first easy drop was Stoutland, who I was really struggling to find room for on the teams. It compounded the fighting weakness pretty badly, and it shared that weakness with T-Tar, and it required something to die to bring it out with the Sand Rush. Without that, it's just another bulky normal type, and it was really struggling to distinguish itself. Again, Intimidate was cool, and I wouldn't have been opposed to bringing it for that, I guess, and especially in a matchup like this against maybe, say, the Golurk, but I just couldn't really justify bringing it at any time, especially when the drop is the piece I was trying to complement. Yes, the other drop is T-Tar. Yeah, my 4-kill, 1-death Tyranitar is gone from the team. I feel like I played the T-Tar very well, actually, around its big weaknesses, and I'm actually very excited to see how I can handle similar mons in the future. But in the end, it just doesn't compare to the big steal in Tier 1 that was still sitting there. T-Tar itself was slow, contributed to common fighting and ground weaknesses, and the Sandstorm often conflicted with what I was trying to do, evidenced by all that residual that was taken by Vikavolt last week, and contributing to Dragapult's demise at the end of Week 2. That extra little bit of chip damage may have been able to survive the roll a little better, if not for the Sandstorm chip. In the end, even though the typing was incredibly valuable, the synergy was spottier than I was hoping, and the weather I was hoping to counter has become more sparse amongst the league compared to the beginning of the season. We'll see someone a little bit later in the season who dropped their rain team. As a result, T-Tar unfortunately got the boot. Had I waited an extra week, perhaps 3 KO performance from Week 3 would have inspired me to hang on to it. But I'm definitely excited to use the 2 new members, especially that Tier 1. The less exciting is the Tier 5 Bullaby, who replaces the defensive dark typing from T-Tar with Eviolite, providing that bulk as well as roost for recovery to help complement that. Defog is amazing control with all these rock weaknesses that have been piling up, and it has the easy ability to spread other annoying moves like Toxic and Knockoff. Aside from those 4, it has the capacity to use flying coverage if really needed, as well as foul play to use the opponent's enormous attack set against them. It's really not all that versatile, but I think this kind of thing still works. Steel types are immune to toxic, removed my Magnezone. Sword Stance are raising attack, punish it with foul play. Random switching, knock off to punish. Honestly, not that bad of a mon in tier 5. If I were to use my one remaining transaction, I could see poking around tier 5 a little more. I could see this thing maybe even doubling up on what Mantine is trying to do. But for now, I am satisfied. However, of course, the big move that I made this week was the acquisition of Mew. Yeah, that's right, Mew, the Harbinger of Death. With infinite set possibilities, Mew can do literally anything I want it to. Choice item, either side, or Scarf. Setup, defensive, stall breaker, hazard stack, pivot, mixed, you name it. Among other things, it provides a psychic type for my team, including psychic coverage, of course, and a fighting resistance over the big fighting weakness given by T-Tar, as well as a heal bell user for the first time on this team to act as a cleric. It's got multiple hazard, including rocks. It's another spikes user, along with Colossal, who I have not yet brought. It also adds toxic spikes, which is kind of cool. And at base 100 speed, it is now the third fastest on the team in between Sneasel and Silvally. That should also take a ton of pressure off of Silvally, who couldn't afford to run normal all that often in order to run Scarf, and was my go-to mon if I needed any role at all. Muke now provides those needs, and allows Silvally even more freedom, which should hopefully alleviate some worries I've been having about how I've been using the Silvally this season. About the only issue I've seen with this move is that both my tier 1s are weak to Ghost and Dark coverage, but I was already weak to Fairy with both of them with T-Tar, so I'm not terribly worried, especially with the newly added Vullaby and the normal or potentially Dark Plate Silvally to help out with that. I'm very excited for Mew, so what kind of role should it take on its team debut? Let's find out. But first, we're going to have to break down his team. So, this team is actually super tough to prep for us. Similar to last week, many of his bigger threats don't have great matchups or are stopped super hard by some of my big threats. Let's start smaller though. Let's start with the Torracat, who just doesn't do much against things like the Mantine, the Sandaconda, the Colossal. It doesn't even lower Dragapult or Sneasel's attacks thanks to their abilities. Charizard does the offensive fire type better anyways, and as a pivot all around, Torracat is really just threatening the fire weak mons out, and that's about it. Klefki is next, as I have excellent hazard control, in addition to a Magnezone that can trap it. Without that, Klefki doesn't really do much of anything, and could end up as a liability even if it comes against the wrong team. The rest of the team at least has decent usage. I'm not really sure though about the Escavalier. Between the strong resistances I have for his coverage and strong moves I have to hit it back, not to mention my own offensive pivoting potential, I don't quite think this is the play. Golurk is super awkward. I'm definitely scared of an offensive set from it, whether Band or Scarf or potentially even Rock Polish, but I have a lot of offensive answers to it. I'm probably most worried about my electric types being run over it, but I have a lot of cool options to deal with it, mainly things like Vullaby, and potential to use things like Sneasel or Dragapult to revenge it very easily. Finally, Slowbro is usually a key piece to his defensive pivoting, but I have so many answers to it. Dragapult, Magnezone, Vikavolt, Sneasel all hit it super effectively with stab moves, as could Silvally potentially, while Mew doesn't care about a Toxic, especially when it can just hit it right back with one thanks to Synchronize. Again, the latter three in there, Escavalier, Golurk, Slowbro, could come, but I think my matchups against them are pretty good. As for the 6 I'm anticipating, Sigilyph is a very weird mon, but it outspeeds a lot of my team, and is maybe his best hazard removal option. Plus, a Life Orb set with things like Heat Wave for coverage can really mess my team up if I'm not prepared, especially if I can't bring it down with the residual damage, or it could just run a Scarf set if it wants to hit Dragapult. Jolteon is probably the electric immunity of choice over Golurk, as its electric and ghost coverage is quite effective against my team. From there, he could either invest in offense or defense to hit harder, or supports the team with a surprisingly good support move pool. Speaking of support, Amoonguss is another electric resist that beats up my tier 5 Spore immunities with Sludge Bomb. Even after Spore, its typing provides great resistances and allows for effective pivoting plays. Keldeo is definitely effective with the usually unresisted stab combo, but I have an advantage with both Mantine and Dragapult. Specs does so much damage though, or even through that, which makes me a little scared to use anything but the Mantine to take it on, so we'll see if maybe he can take advantage of me being forced to bring Mantine. Gmax Charizard is a very scary threat with powerful wildfires that do residual damage to my non-fire type team members, and provides flying, grass, and ground coverage potentially to go with it, as well as potentially Roost. As the Gmax, it cannot wear boots, but it's terrifying. Finally, Umbreon is the defensive wall for my team, for sure. It resists Dragapult's Shadow Ball, it takes less than you might think from the Dragon coverage, and it provides Wish and Heal Bell support. The advantages I have are the need to invest either physically or specially, so he needs to commit one way or the other a lot, and I also have a Vikavolt with amazing bug coverage for this absolute unit. Aside from that, Umbreon will be a pain to break through, and I expect it to come 100%. As for my side, Tangela again fails to make the cut, being exceptionally weak to things like Charizard, Sigilyph, Torracat, and Escavalier, while the other attackers can push through, and the support can do as it pleases. Amoonguss is the biggest issue, perhaps, as after knockoff, I'm basically stuck. Vullaby will have to wait for its debut, as even its best matchup with Golurk can do massive damage with a Heavy Slam or Ice Punch. Knockoff spam is indeed good, but again, too many things can just do as they please in front of it. I just can't allow that. While Sneasel is hot off a great performance last week and does pretty well revenging threats like Amoonguss, Golurk, and Sigilyph, the positives kind of stop there. It's outsped by Jolteon, it's unable to hurt Keldeo or Charizard enough, it gets destroyed by Escavalier, it's even more bait for Umbreon. It has a place here, but not this time. Colossal could have been kind of cool as a nice check to things like Charizard lacking Scorching Sands, or maybe even the Amoonguss or the Escavalier, but it's just a little too weak to big threats like Keldeo, like Golurk, like Slowbro, while risking things like that Scorching Sands coverage from Charizard. Besides, we've got a similar, more effective team member to do what I'd have this guy do. Finally, I went back and forth so often about the last couple teammates, but ultimately decided to leave behind the G-Max Sandaconda. Perhaps it's a bit disappointing to not bring the G-Max 3 out of the first 4 weeks, especially when it does pretty well into physical attackers, as well as Jolteon, and in a pinch it can be used to KO the rampaging G-Max Charizard or other menaces. Additionally, the trapping mechanic of whipping up a Sand Tomb on the defensive tanks is very interesting and useful for trapping and punishing them. However, I found a Silvally type in the end that I'm excited to use, and it deals with all those threats relatively well in its own right, while being a more stable bring overall. Sandaconda falls apart to things like Keldeo and simply cannot tank hits well enough from things like the Golurk or the Charizard to make the bring worth it. That leaves these 6, the Tier 1s, Tier 2s, and Tier 3s. Maybe a boring bring, but I'm ready to get back on track after a couple shaky weeks, so let's bring our first 6 picks, minus the T-Tar and adding in the new addition, Mew. This week I like the idea of hazard stacking, what with Klefki getting trapped so easily, and Sigilyph being forced to be the defogger as a result. And Sigilyph is something I'd love to get a free turn in front of with almost every member of this team. Mew can get around the totem shenanigans with a nice, fast taunt. Otherwise, the game plan is simply to get up Stealth Rock if Charizard is present, and otherwise, start with Spikes. The final move being Foul Play is kind of neat, and if you looked at the team slot already, or the item slot already, you know what this is for. This is a weird Golurk switch-in, but it should work wonderfully, considering he's going to click Poltergeist on this thing, and probably just click it freely overall, as I don't have a Ghost Resist this week. I take no damage from it, and then Oko back with Foul Play most of the time after a single round of Spikes. Hopefully no Shadow Punch, hopefully he thinks he needs the extra coverage moves for things like Vullaby, and the only Ghost coverage move is Poltergeist. If I think he's choice locked, that makes it even easier to just come in and get up hazards for later. How do you beat defensive mon switching? Punish them for switching in at all with some entry hazards. That makes enough sense to me, and Taunt is such a good move against his team, so here's the Mew, I suppose. Let's look at the next most important team member this week, and I think that's probably going to be this Magnezone, with whom I can finally use Magnet Pull for the Klefki and or the Escavalier. This time, however, we've got a substitute leftover set, which can take advantage of his walls and force his switches quite effectively. For example, Umbreon, Klefki, and Amoonguss, if it lacks Stomping Tantrum, struggle tremendously breaking through a sub against this thing, which can ease prediction and allow me to beat them 1v1. Klefki is such a liability against this set in general, as I'm even immune to either Statica Throwout, Thunderwave, or Toxic, and if I can confirm there's no Stomping Tantrum on Amoonguss, I struggle to think of a more free substitute, with Giga Drain struggling to even 2-hit KO the sub with that little bit of Spadef investment. From there, it's just clicking stab moves, or tossing off a Toxic, which is mostly for the Evolutions, who are the best tanks for this guy, wearing them down faster than the attacking moves, and potentially forcing them to heal Bell if they have it. The goal is most certainly to end up in front of one of the bigger offensive threats with the sub intact. Keldeo and Charizard and Sigilyph are all O-code, but until the electric immunities and resists are gone, it's a little tough to just spam T-Bolt, so sub can punish the switching he has to do on top of the spikes from earlier. Again, this could mean that he has to sack something fast just to bring down the sub, which can let me switch out again into something to take a hit, and eventually repeat the process all over again, but this time with one less available option to break an incoming sub. Really proud of this set. About the only possible difference is maybe the Charge Beam or Toxic, but 2 electric immunities that could come, I think Toxic is definitely the safer option. Another fun little thing, if he does in fact have Synchronize on something, or for the Umbreon in particular is what I'd be thinking of, I can Toxic that freely and be able to get away with it thanks to my Steel typing. So next up we're going to have the Dragapult set here. I thought we might try and do a little bit of a throwback to Gen 5. Anyone remember Dragmag? If not, the concept is pretty simple. Magnezone clears out the steel types, trapping them with Magnet Pull, to let a dragon or two spam their powerful, now unresisted stab moves. This obviously changed dramatically in Gen 6 with the introduction of fairies, but the only fairy that John has is also a steel type, meaning that even the fairy can be trapped by Magnezone. Thus, when the steel types are out, the Specs Draco Meteor will destroy some souls. Even Umbreon is afraid, taking about 40% even with full investment, meaning that the full suite of hazards being down means that this isn't a safe switch in. U-turn is a safe option, of course, if I don't think I'm going to bring down the Umbreon yet, or if I think a steel type is coming in, which is just easy prey for Magnezone, of course. Shadow Ball is more consistent than Draco if Umbreon is eliminated, and it hits the steel targets neutrally too. The Thunderbolt is good neutral coverage all around. It hits the Keldeo and Charizard with potentially better consistency, even if it allows in Jolteon and Golurk for free. Very powerful threat. Excited to just click buttons with this. So how do I follow up the strong Dragon type? How about with another one? So Volley Dragon is the typing I've decided on this time, though I wasn't really sure about it for quite a while in team building. I started with Electric actually, which would give me 3 Electric types in the team, and then I flipped between a ton of different sets. Assault Vest, Dark Silvally, Water Silvally, even Bug Silvally, even Air Balloon for the Golurk. In the end, I have so much confidence in the Magnezone set that I decided to double down on the Dragon typing. It's a pretty similar concept to the Zone, honestly, just offensive instead of defensive. Threaten something out and try and set up, with SD providing way too much power, and Flame Charge is a very cool tech option to not just raise speed above his entire team, that's what the 24 speed investment is for that Jolteon at +1, but it also OHKOs the Escavalier at +2. Dragon and Fire is perfect coverage together against his team, and the Dragon typing also provides resistance to stab from things like Jolteon, Keldeo, Charizard, Torracat, Amoonguss, and Slowbro. Yeah, that's a lot, and especially against some of those higher up mons, the speedy demons of Keldeo, Charizard, Jolteon, and instills a lot of confidence in me that I can find a time to just set up. Parting Shot is, of course, a nice option to keep up the momentum, especially if I can use it to bring in Magnezone against something like Amoonguss or a Steel type. Otherwise, it's cool scouting to see what I should do the next time I bring it in. Is a Escavalier going to be the switch? I can Sword Stance next time and just Flame Charge it. Is he planning on sacking the Keldeo? Flame Charge first, and then multi-attack. That's the idea. I'd like to be more aggressive with Silvally this time around, as I've definitely not been playing it well this season. The final 2 mons are relatively standard sets. We'll start with, of course, with the Mantine as a complete Keldeo counter, as well as a check to mons like Charizard and Slowbro. With all that physical defense, Keldeo, with its signature move, the fighting move is going to do damage to the physical side, so I need to invest in that. And Keldeo's only doing about a quarter of my health at most, even when holding a pair of Specs. Considering that, I outfitted Mantine to stop this, and probably the Charizard, his most fearsome sweepers, from possibly setting up. And that's what Haze is for. Helps me beat Calm Mind Keldeo, even with Scald as the only attack. And it's a move that also helps destroy things like the Charizard and the Golurk that Scald is. Roost obvious for longevity, and then Defog is in an emergency. In case he brings the Klefki, I trap it and I kill it immediately. And he brings in the Keldeo or something like that to kill his own. That's kind of the goal. It lets me go lefties instead of boots, because the only real rocker is Golurk. It's a cool set, it's kind of niche, and it really only hard stops the Keldeo, but I won't be making the same mistake as last week, I hope. Anyway, speaking of more niche counters, the last member of the team is going to be Vikavolt yet again, and this guy's carrying a pair of goggles to help beat that Amoonguss. Bug Buzz does pretty close to half against Amoonguss, depending on his spread, and can't be put to sleep thanks to the item here. I've also got enough speed for Umbreon, because as opposed to Magnezone, outspeeding it actually matters a bit due to the super effective bug coverage. Bug Buzz hits a lot of his team hard, especially with the Jolteon, who can come in on my Volt Switch for free. The other free switch in Golurk will not appreciate the Energy Ball from Modest Max Special Attack Vikavolt either. That's the team. I need to be sure to keep the particular answers for particular mons alive, and just let Magnezone do some work. Let's head into the battle. Despite getting 2 of the guesses wrong, I suppose it makes a lot of sense for him to leave the Sigilyph and G-Max Charizard behind. Those are the 2 he was dropping after the match anyways, which probably indicated that he wasn't particularly comfortable with bringing them in the first place. That aside, Golurk and Slowbro were the next 2 anticipated members anyways, so I think we did quite well this time. No reason to lead anything other than Mew and start clicking spikes, so here we go. Right into an Amoonguss. I don't like that matchup, so of course I'm going to double into Vikavolt, and he knows one of his better answers to an offensive Mew set is Slowbro, so we both switch on turn 1. But I like my position here a little bit more. All 3 of my attacks hit Slowbro super effectively, so it's more of a matter of whichever move I feel like clicking. Volt Switch could get me into Magnezone early, but it's the obvious play. Energy Ball could catch the Golurk early, but the other plausible switches don't care that much. In the end, I think Bug Buzz is the best neutral play, and it is actually going to end up doing exactly half of Amoonguss's health and get the unfortunate Spadef drop there too, which would guarantee KOing it with the second Bug Buzz, as the Black Sludge would have kept it out of range otherwise. That's actually also a little unfortunate for me, as he otherwise may have been incentivized to keep the Amoonguss in on the Spore, which of course wouldn't work against me. As it is, I need to click Bug Buzz again, even if it means he gets a switch. Golurk is a good play from here, covering Bug Buzz and Volt Switch, but it still actually takes more than a third from the Bug Buzz, which is pretty cool. And as I look at his team a little bit more, wow, is Vikavolt actually very good here. I need to save this for later, and the most expendable team member from the very beginning is going to be that Mew. So I also have a nice little surprise if Poltergeist comes in, which it doesn't. Stone Edge is a good call for Golurk, as opponents still refuse to miss moves against me this season. And Mew takes a little bit under half. I don't need to be fancy here right now. Spikes are my play to guarantee the future residual damage, and besides, while Foul Play does finish him off, I wouldn't be surprised to see him swap into something else, say like this Umbreon here, who I know will not be appreciating the hazard stacking. I think it's about time for Magnezone, though, who is going to come in on a Wish. I think we all know it's coming next. As I stated before, Umbreon and the incoming Amoonguss have a terrible time trying to break this substitute. Seeing Amoonguss come in is justification I picked the right set. Oh no, it restores its health. It does that anyways all the time. I'll take the sub. Umbreon comes back in. It's going to take only a quarter from the Flash Cannon. We had another Spadef drop. This one matters a whole lot more for sure, I think. And we're also starting to see that Spikes damage come into play a little bit, as he's already down to 64%. So, as he is going to Wish again here, I know that the safe play, despite the Spadef drop, is going to be to click that Toxic. It covered him staying in, also possibly going into a check like Jolteon. So I like that play a lot more there. This absolutely needs a timer on it. He cannot be switching out just about infinitely and dancing around with wishes. I'm going to stay in and show that Foul Play is not going to break the sub with max HP and Flash Cannon. Still does a sizable chunk, and it needed to happen too in order to prevent that Golurk from coming in case he was trying to get on an electric move. I can do about half to it, but I'd prefer it not to be at full health, and if I can do a little bit more than that half, potentially, that thing could go down, because after Spikes damage, we'll be at about 51-52%. So Flash Cannon was definitely the play there, I think. So at this point, though, Thunderbolt is a little bit better since there isn't a Wish incoming quite yet. We're going to show that 39% toxic damage is really starting to rack up now, down to 29% only, which is pretty nice. I think Flash Cannon was probably the play here as well, but I clicked sub again as he brings in Keldeo, just in case he was trying to KO me in like a last-ditch attack before going down. And as we can see, oh no, the Keldeo restores health. It really doesn't matter all that much, and I just need to try and hit what's in front of me. I don't need to outpredict this right now. Jolteon is coming in. Sure, he'll take the electric hit, but I'm still behind a sub. Down it goes finally, and Toxic is definitely the play here for this electric immunity. I need to start breaking these down, for sure. I'm going to start breaking down the couple of possible switch-ins that he has for this. I am exposed right now, but I don't know about this thing's item yet. So, as seeing the Shadow Ball coverage makes a lot of sense, of course, for things like the Dragapult, but I'd like to be sure as to which item he's got. His Shadow Ball crits for 64, and Flash Cannon does a little bit less than a third. A quick calculator made a little more awkward by the crit, and yeah, that's a max roll for Choice Specs Shadow Ball. Obviously, that's how the season's gone so far, right? Still, we're in pretty good position, and knowing that this is Specs, if only we had a special wall that could take a Shadow Ball with no Charizards, and being assured that this thing is Specs, Mantine is the answer. Eats it up with absolute ease, less than a quarter, and recovering the lefties for a turn, which is nice. I'm not sure what he's switching in here, so I figure I could probably just keep up some pressure by doubling, actually, as the Jolteon goes very low. I'm going to double out into the Soul Volley, as Slowbro does make a lot of sense for a switch-in, even with the low special defense stat. Slowbro really won't be taking too much, and if it could just fire off a Toxic or something back onto the Mantine, then that's all it really needs to do, and that makes a lot of sense. Boosting up past this thing isn't really something I can do right now, so I think I'm just going to actually Parting Shot out, and I'm going to go into Dragapult. It should be able to KO just about anything right now. I take a fat 33% from the Ice Beam, no freeze, thank goodness. It's still good coverage. I was definitely expecting something like a Scald or a Toxic or mainly a Teleport, honestly. But it's fine. Shadow Ball should be able to claim anything. Even the Umbreon, when it switches in and takes chip damage, only does 14%, so this thing is very bulky. Another Shadow Ball finished off, but you reveal Sucker Punch, which also crits. At least we lived it, barely, and yeah, we pick up the first KO of the match. I don't know if it was really worth it to risk the Sucker Punch there when I had the opportunity to do something like switch, maybe Savali right there, or even the Magnezone was a totally free switch, but I didn't want to really risk it healing back up right there. Cool tech, crit sucks, but honestly, crit or not, it essentially accomplished what it wanted to either way. And because it didn't kill, I don't think the crit matters all that much. Maybe the difference of surviving like a Sludge Bomb or something, and we'll see if that comes up or not. Speaking of though, the Mushroom is in front of us. It's a good choice. Shadow Ball is not going to KO this thing right now. Vikavolt is, of course, the switch every single time, so it's going to be able to come in. And Polch can, of course, still revenge stuff, so it needs to get out. And there it is. There are the goggles, keeping the Beetle awake for a nice little Bug Buzz coming up here. Or so you'd think. I clicked Energy Ball with the intention of hitting one of those immunities, but he stayed in. So, of course, it's fine, too, because I can still just stay in and roost. We know Bug Buzz, just about 2 shots. I can roost on that another Sludge Bomb. Yeah, we're kind of getting nowhere now, huh? So, this turn I'm going to change the cups a little bit, and I'm going to Volt Switch right out and break this cycle, check a V-switching, go into the Magnezone, and actually get immune to the Toxic, which is absolutely perfect. On the turn that he's going to try and break down the wall of Amoonguss, perfect. It's sub time. Jolteon's definitely a fair enough answer to zone, as we saw that it broke my sub earlier with Shadow Ball before going down, and it's just going to do that again here, and this time it's going to be staying down thanks to all that residual. 6-4 now, but John's win earlier this season actually saw him with the exact same 4 Pokemon take down a full team. So we still have to keep our wits about us. Golurker's a cool switch, but Mew doesn't need to do all that much anymore on the switch. Yeah, it worked! No item. Mew is unaffected by Poltergeist. Perfect. And we know from the earlier damage that 47% that it did that this is probably banded. So that's pretty nice. He's got to switch out, which lets me get another layer of spikes up on the incoming Slowbro. That's an easy taunt here as well, which will let me stop that hard teleport. I can get up layer numero 3 on the incoming Keldeo, which took a bit of residual there too. This, I think, was a relatively bad misplay. Mew doesn't have much use right now, it's true, but I don't need to sack it off to this Keldeo. I have a Mantine, but yeah, Mew goes down. If it's any consolation, we know that this Keldeo is either Specs or Modest. Probably Modest Scarf, I think would make a lot of sense. Mantine's switch, and honestly, I could be doubling out pretty easily right now, but I don't mind just scalding something else, forcing some more switches on the full suite of spikes, and a burn under the Slowbro would be pretty nice. There it is. Okay, not bad at all. We're probably just going to eat up another Scald here before just getting out of there with Teleport into the Amoonguss, and we're starting to see the chip. Look at that 24% chip. That's really nice. I've said it before, Vikavolt's always the switch, and he's going to actually double as well. Back out into the Keldeo. This would have been a good switch if it weren't for those hazards, 25% from the hazards, and that taken into consideration, I'll take this trade for sure, because I can always go right back out into the Mantine. Slowbro, of course, is going to be the switch, but this time, yes, I predicted that switch and went right into the Dragapult. Didn't think he'd be staying into Hydro again. He can't afford to, cannot afford to. So this was definitely a very nice play. This is a proactive play that was actually relatively safe, and I definitely appreciate the understanding that I had in the match that he could not stay in, he could not click Hydro Pump again, he could not afford to let Mantine just stay in and continue to chip away at that thing. So that was very nice, and it probably proves the choice item theory correct, him swapping out there. So Shadow Ball's probably a safe place here. Draco Meteor, though, is very strong and basically secures a KO, especially if I think Amoonguss is the switch. Amoonguss probably get 2 KO'd by the Shadow Ball, but, you know, I'm just going to click the Draco Meteor button and try to claim a kill. Here is the Amoonguss, takes the chip, and boom! Draco with the KO. Can this get any better? Actually, yes. Here's the Golurk after all that chip. go down to another Draco. That's what I'm talking about. Amazing. 3 KOs for the Dragapult, while at 5% for all of them. That gets rid of one of the annoying walls and one of the annoying breakers, which is absolutely perfect. That should show the power of spikes, I think, as both of those KOs were brought to you with the power of specs plus hazards. So only got the 2 water types left. So my switch into Slowbro is going to be the Vikavolt, who takes the hit not that well, actually, and gets burned. Not that it matters all that much, honestly. Volt Switch, the easy play, and Slowbro proves that its bulkiness is seriously just physical, because it just goes down. Vikavolt on the board, finally, and with only Keldeo left, Mantine just makes sense. His choice to lock into is Icy Wind, which I guess nothing is immune to it, at least, and I'm just going to Scald to another burn. I think every Scald in this match burned, which is pretty funny, and I don't think any of them particularly mattered. Mantine will just stay in because I think it deserves the final KO, even if it's by that burn. And that should finish off the 5-0 win. GG to John. I know he didn't have that much time to prep this week, but he still made some great decisions in the team building process, so props to him for that. Still, this could have been a 6-0 had I not saved the Mew, had I not rather gone into, or stayed in with the Mew and the Keldeo, as we see how easily Mantine just manhandles that thing. It's not a big deal in hindsight, but it is still a symptom, but it's not bad. I was unable to grab an interview, so let's just wrap things up by going over the match in general and what everything did. So that Amoonguss was super annoying. Definitely appreciated having safety goggles on a grass-type resist. That made it somewhat irrelevant, honestly, but a Toxic onto Vikavolt could have made that interaction actually pretty interesting. It was so tanky. That was definitely something I appreciated having those spikes up for. As looking back, I didn't really have many ways to break through it, so spikes being up was super necessary, as it took almost its full regenerator damage every time it swapped in there by the end, at 25%. Slowbro, while weak to a lot of my mons, was mostly working for a potential status move. It was a risky switch, honestly, bringing in the Dragapult earlier on it, as Slowbro does get Thunder Wave, among other things, but didn't work out for him in the end, so I can't be too upset. The boots on Slowbro is somewhat standard, but I really didn't much mind not getting any chip on it because I had a lot of ways to KO the Slowbro compared to Amoonguss. Keldeo was made 100% irrelevant by the Mantine, which is really the part that makes the Mew sack worse, I think. Keldeo is so strong, and Scarf, if that's what it was, great call because the ability to outspeed Dragapult. It just needed to just hit hard and get out because of Mantine, so I think that's fine. It just was not the greatest matchup with me being able to just bring in Mantine every single time. Golurk is definitely a strong boy, and if it weren't for the obscure Mew, it would have claimed at least 1 KO, though of course I can revenge it with ease using Dragapult or suggest something else. Umbreon is of course annoying, and I have to admit that Sucker Punch was a great tech move for the Dragapult. Not sure what the last move was, probably Toxic, which makes for a bit of an awkward setup overall. That's kind of the point of the Magnezone set, right here honestly, that's a full set. Finally, Specs Jolteon is a cool call because of how much it helps its power, especially for the coverage moves that don't get a stab boost. However, as we saw with the Mantine, it didn't exactly help whenever I found out. So, although he got the crit, and it was a little upsetting that he got that on the Magnezone outside of the sub, it was honestly probably worth it just to find out the set. On my side, Dragapult was, I think, the MVP. Its power showing itself as it ripped holes through everything. It even KO'd the Umbreon after all that chip. That chip, of course, was provided by Mew, who didn't deserve its death, but otherwise was oh so helpful with the hazard support. The no item tech was so spicy too. Very glad it was here as a Golurk switch in. The Magnezone set was the proper call, but it didn't do as much as it could have, I think. Possibly because of the lack of Klefki, but that's kind of unlikely in the first place. It was incredibly effective at what it did, which was take out the Jolteon entirely with the Toxic damage and then a Flash Cannon, and it wore down the Umbreon super effectively too. Two of the mons that I was most afraid of, and I just did not have direct counters or switch-ins to otherwise. So Volley did nothing, again. Although I think I'm starting to learn a little bit at a time what Silvali's role on a team really should be, so I'm excited to see what I come up with next. That said, Parting Shot was actually instrumental in facilitating the switch to Dragapult, who needed that extra health to survive the Sucker Punch crit. Mantine is such a good Keldeo answer, it really didn't need to do anything else. It could have been nice to have Toxic on it, but I think the set was still proper, and the burn on Slowbro maybe mattered a little bit. It helped a tiny little bit with getting chip and a tiny bit of pressure on it, which is more than you would expect from a Toxic-less Mantine otherwise. Finally, Vikavolt was actually outstanding in the matchup with an amazing move pool for everything he had. I could see us meeting again in the playoffs. I have a cool idea of what to do with this thing if we get to play again. Oh well, I think that'll just do it for this week. Impressive win for sure. But it's back to the big boys next week. Check out the next video where we've got to face off against Michael, coach of a fellow 3-1 team in the Kanto Kinglers. Let's ensure we're back on track then. See ya.